Major support for these broadcasts is provided by the CUNY TV Foundation, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's window company, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Geneva Burns, Gian Tomasi and Webster, M&T Bank, the Wickoff Group, Chelsea Lighting, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional support is provided by Ackman Ziff Real Estate, AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi, USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International, NYC, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Eastern Union Funding, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Hersha Hospitality Trust, Investors Bank, New Banks, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, John Katzimatidis, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Madison Realty Capital, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, People's United Bank, Popular Community Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, and these friends.
All of a sudden, all these banks want to come into New York City and the neighboring area. Why do they want to be here? Who knows why? But today I brought together 4 bankers who really are very involved in the community, and they're going to tell us why these streets are paved with gold. My guests today include Joe Ficalora, who is the president and CEO of New York Community Bank Corp., Richard East, who is the president and CEO of Customers Bank, Jack Kopinski, who is the president and CEO of Provident New York Bank. And last but not least, from the Garden State, my friend Kevin Cummings, who's the president and CEO of Investors Bank. So I got the $44.5 billion bank. I have the $3.2 billion bank in that range. I have about another $3.3 billion bank, and I got a $13 billion bank. You've been here a long time. We'll get to a reason over here. But you know what? You came over a couple years ago. I mean, you weren't even a banker. You were just the accountant for these banks. Why do you want to be in the metro area? What's the reason? Why is it great to be here? What's wrong about being in New Jersey, Newark, Hunterdon County? You know, what's wrong? Who needs to be in Manhattan?
It's a beautiful thing, the density of population. You know, you can open up a branch in Brooklyn and you can touch hundreds of thousands of people. Each 5 blocks is a different neighborhood, different marketing style. And in our retail commitment, you know, with the foundation and all the good things we're doing, people appreciate it, and it's a good place to open up business.
But here's a question. How many branches do you have, Joe?
276.
How many branches do you have?
14. On a combined basis, we'll have 46.
The question is, he doesn't believe in having many branches. Joe DiPaolo, who started Signature Bank with Scott Shea on May 1, 2001, they have maybe 2 or 3 branches on the ground floor. Today, branches don't have to be out there, right? You haven't opened up a new branch if you didn't make acquisitions over the years.
Well, we've actually closed branches over the years. We acquire banks, and we close some of their branches, but we still have accumulated 276. We do have internet banking. We've actually acquired internet banking operations in various places. The future is going to be very different than the past. Obviously, people will be able to do banking from home. They won't need to do banking at a local store or bank as we understand.
But isn't that what's changing today? The bricks and mortar really aren't needed. I mean, with the exception of, you know, TD, who's wild about opening up all of these locations, and I don't understand the profitability formula if it's that profitable over there. But I understand what you're saying, you know, as you opened up in Brooklyn in certain markets, there are great needs because you can absorb a lot of deposits over there. But you're more in the technology, aren't you, Richard?
We are, well, certainly on the consumer side. But we believe in taking the bank to the customer as opposed to having the customer come to the bank. But we're a business bank largely. You know, we're a bank for the privately owned companies. We're a bank for the owners of the privately owned companies, a bank for the managers of the privately owned companies, and to the extent possible, the employees of the privately owned companies.
Right, and I think in reality that's what the mantra is of what you are at Provident, and also what you're trying to do with investors.
Absolutely. So, you know, we're really focused on the middle market clients. So companies that have sales from 5 million to 100 million. And why we're going to New York is that you think about the markets we're in today. I think the statistics are there are, in the counties we presently operate in, for companies between 500,000 in revenue to 100 million in revenue, there are a little over 20,000 of those companies. In the counties, in the city, the boroughs, the island, northern New Jersey, there's something like 860,000 companies that fit that criteria. So frankly, you're going where the business is, one. And secondly, from a competitive standpoint, you know, in that niche where we're very focused, you know, the big banks have a tough time serving that niche, you know, the Chases and the B of A's and the cities.
But in reality, the big banks, that's why they're not invited here today. I mean, we're looking at institutions in two ways on both sides of my arms over here, institutions who have grown by mergers, okay? When you opened up, when you made your first acquisition in 2000, you were a $1.8 billion bank. You were a $44.5 billion bank. When you joined investors, they were Sleepy Mutual with what?
$5 billion.
$5 billion. And you've made 10 acquisitions. You've made already about 8 acquisitions over here. Now, when you do the acquisitions, and when I read the press release on your acquisition, some of the acquisitions are also beneficial because you're reducing costs over there and you're trying to be more of efficiency. When you do an acquisition, how do you make a determination? What type of bank do you want to buy? I mean, you know.
Well, you know, you actually want to make sure that at the end of the day, you can handle the inherent risks in the asset portfolio, because that's really the risk of banking is assets. So you either have to be in a position to dispose of all their assets, or to manage those assets that you choose.
You know,
to keep.
and I think you bring out an interesting thing, because in your acquisition last year of Brooklyn Federal, what you did is you really bought the branches and you bought the facilities, but you didn't buy, you disposed of many of their loans, correct?
Well, Brooklyn was under a cease and desist. They went public in 2005 and got into the construction lending in Manhattan and New York City at the worst possible time. So we bought them at 80 cents for 80 cents a share. And they went out at $10 a share. So we had a lot of room to take a great credit mark and move the assets off the book.
So here, you know, you bring up the subject of construction lending, and this is something that we discussed prior to the show. Today, one of the riskiest business is because, you know, we can't foretell the future. Who knew that we'd be in such a strong real estate market today? But when you do construction, it's 2 years, 2 to 3 years down the road. But many of the banks, and I'm not saying the banks over here, I know Joe's not doing much. I know you're doing a limited amount of construction. You really aren't doing any, and I don't know if you're doing any. But many of the new players besides yourself, you know, like SunTrust, Union Bank, BBVA, Compass, all these banks are coming here, Builders Bank, and what are they doing? They can't compete with you in multifamily, or you because you're over there competing with him right now. They're doing construction loans. What, if you're here and you're banking, what do you want to lend to?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. I think most, you know, you always try to find a few things that you can do very well. And why are we interested in New York? Well, first of all, we go where the talent is, and we consider New York to be the financial center of the universe. That's why we're here, you know, because we can find the talent. We also see significant opportunities in multifamily. You know, we've done, in 1 year, we've done $500 million of the multifamily lending, and that's $5 to $7 million per transaction.
But
It's a significant.
But let's be realistic, you know, and I and I like the owners of property, but the only person who's really doing beneficial today on lending in the multifamily is the borrower, because they're paying these record low rates. And then there's a big question of, how many years can these rates stay over there? And when you take a debt yield later on, how do you make the credit risk? I mean, expenses are going up, taxes go up, water goes up, reserves go up, and if you lend at 2 3/4%,
Well, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. But getting back to what Joe was talking about, you never want to get involved with any credit risk. That's why we won't chase construction lending for yield. We would more focus on the lower rate with the a very controlled credit risk. And our balance sheet, the way we're structured, even though I'm doing 500 million, I've got $1.1 billion in warehouse lending that reprices, every 22 days. So I don't have the interest rate risk going on.
how do you protect yourself on the interest rate risk?
Similarly. And obviously, we did about $11 billion in originations last year through the mortgage bank. We have a mortgage bank that we fund, and certainly we sell all those loans. So I think all in, this is a difficult market if, in fact, you have a large percentage of the assets you're creating that are tied into a fixed rate at these low rates. No question.
So but here's the question. You open up locations, you open up new locations. How do you retain and get new people? I mean, you opened up a loan production office first. You were the first one over there. You've recently opened up a loan production office. You have a loan, yeah, I mean, because you were based in Montebello. How do you get new people? Why do they come to the new kids in town?
Well, I'll tell you, our bank has been kind of a growth story. We've grown from 5.8 billion to 13 billion over the last 5 years. It's mostly through both organic and acquisitions. And we're actually out there. People want to join us because there's a lot going on. I mean, lenders want to lend. And you think of what happened in 2009, 2010, they were frustrated. So recruiting good lenders has been, pretty successful for us.
I think this team-based approach that we're using, so what we're basically doing is we're hiring teams from different organizations that are frustrated with not being nimble in addressing client needs. So our teams are 3 to 5 people, that one's a lender, one's a deposit gatherer, and there are service folks. And people love to, in essence, run their own business. We look at their profitability per team. So there's a lot of talented folks that are maybe at large organizations or other organizations that don't have the ability to address their clients' needs. The best people want to do a great job for their clients, and the best people want to do a great job for the company that they work with. And we're just giving them the opportunity to do that.
Here's the question, and I know it happened because I do know the signature model rather well. Sometimes in order for you to get these teams, it's like going out for Mariano Rivera, and
Sure.
Do you pay bonuses? Do you do sign-up bonuses to get these people? I mean, it's like getting locations and buying branches. I mean, what about you?
Occasionally, it's a rare occasion we'll do a sign-up bonus. But with our second step, the stock compensation that's going to be available to our employees, people are excited about it. We have an ESOP plan, defined benefit plan, so we kind of try to sell the full benefit package to our new employees.
And it is a total comp, and in our case also, there's a good component of it that's stock related. And again, you have folks that want to come so that they are in an environment where they can control their own destiny, and that's what kind of we provide. We give them the tools and the resources to control their own destiny, dealing with their clients, and obviously supporting what the bank's doing.
Yeah, I think the 2 things that matter, it's really, in our view, it's kind of simple. The 2 things that matter about people, and I don't care whether you're going after a group director from Signature as we did, or you're going after anybody else. They all have 2 things in common. One, they want to have something to look forward to. Getting back to your comment, Jack, because that makes them feel good about themselves, and they want to know that somebody actually gives a rip about them.
That's right.
If you can marry those 2 things and create that kind of a culture, it's very easy to attract people.
See, you've always been able to attract and retain people because they love the stock and they've done rather well, and they do well because they get vested and they get the dividends and everything else. Is that the reason you think you've been able to keep good people?
I think our business model is a little different than others. The fact is that we've never lost a major lender, you know, in decades and decades, and that actually goes back before we were a stock company. But for the last 20 years, we've been a stock company, and we do compensate heavily with stock, and we do not pay people on production. So that's different than most other places.
Now, so you're paying your people on production.
No, I'm not. I'm paying them on actually bottom line. So we
Profitability.
Profitability, right? So
That's what I meant. I mean,
yeah.
as opposed, production is always, you can always do a lot of production. Doesn't mean it's good production.
That's right.
It's
That's
the
exactly right.
Okay, it's
That's
the
right.
bottom line of what, you know, it's great. Oh, I booked $25 million. Oh,
Yeah.
but 15 of it. Crap. Okay, forget about that. Okay.
We've been there, done that.
We pay on production, but we have a risk management piece on it, on delinquencies and stuff like that, and charge-offs.
Okay, and what about on deposits?
Deposits too. And that's where you try to get the integration between the retail side of the bank and the commercial side.
So where are the opportunities, you know, that since you're all here, are the opportunities just to rape J.P. Morgan, HSBC,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Bank
Love
of
the big
Bank of New
banks.
York?
Yeah.
Okay, or is it unfortunately to hit the other friends sitting here? You're competing with each other also.
Look, I'll tell you a
We
story
can't
about.
do that. We can't do that. I can't steal customers from New York Community or Investors or Provident. But I'll tell you, we love the big banks because you can steal their customers and they can't respond to you. And as long as you stay below a certain radar level,
Okay,
they can't
but
react.
you know, let's be realistic. Besides the fact that I mentioned that you're here, you know, there's that other gorilla, you know, who allegedly is based in Florida, but he's not in Florida. Okay, you know, he's not even at 50th Street. He has this little office on 29 West 57th Street where he's just sitting there with his assistant. But he's, you know, quietly plotting.
Yeah.
You don't believe he's going to, you know, I'm talking about Bank United. Don't you believe the Bank United and other banks like Bank United want to come in here the same way that you came into here? I mean, you were with Key Bank, okay? What did you know about, I mean,
Sure.
you knew Cleveland. That's where he now.
Well, first of all, there are plenty of opportunities. So I get this question all the time. Well, aren't you concerned about John Kent's? Well, he's a terrific guy and did a wonderful job, but there are.
What about Jack Barnes and People's United?
There's a ton of opportunity here. You know, the story I was going to say is over about a 2-month period, I had our teams. One of the secrets is to keep the organizational flat, and I think all of us have pretty flat organizational structures, not hierarchical organization structures, so you're close to the client and you get a feel for the clients and the teams. But about a 60-day period, I had the teams take me out to 20 prospects. These prospects all were individuals that had net worths over $100 million. All were clients of large organizations. None of them knew who their account officer was. It had changed so many times. All of them were frustrated about they had a lending need, they had to go to one place, they had an investment need, they had to go to another place, a deposit need, a third place. So that's what we're dealing with. When we lose that as banks, then we'll lose the tie-in to the client.
But don't we sometimes lose that because, you know, when you're a small bank, you know, Jack, you can talk to many of your customers. When you have 80 group directors, you really can't talk to every one of your clients.
No, but you have good people that can.
Right,
I mean,
but
you have terrific folks
you
that
know
can.
that's something that, you know, Canis utilized when he was at Norfolk. That's something Joe DiPaolo used at Signature, but he's still trying. Okay, and I know you're trying to do it the same way. You know, you elevate and keep the relationship the same way that you keep your relationship with some of your good clients.
Sure.
But banks are to make a profit. So where is the areas that you can make a profit? What markets are there? Are we going to be selling title insurance? Are we going to be selling investment management? Are we going to be selling multifamily loans? Are we going to sell asset-based loans? What do you see as the opportunities in the years ahead, Jack?
So, you know, I believe the challenge in banking today has been that banks have tried to be all things to all people. So as a result, they do a poor job of servicing the client, and by the way, have very high costs doing that. So I think you have to focus on specific niches where you can make a difference. Our particular niche we've chosen is this kind of $5 to $100 million middle market client that is closely held. We can provide all the commercial services, solution-based services to that client, as well as the consumer-based services to that client. That's the niche.
Okay, but that sounds to me like a middle market customer.
That's right.
Okay, does that relate to only businesses, or does it also relate to real estate companies?
Both. It's businesses and real estate companies that have that type of revenue streams.
Do you see the market for factoring finance growing?
Absolutely. As we merge with Sterling, Sterling has some terrific product groups, factoring, asset-based lending, leasing, payroll finance. What I'm trying to do is create a diversity of solutions for the client. So we have clients that have all kinds of needs in that $5 to $100 million sales area. We're being able to bring back a variety of very well thought out and well run businesses that can provide those solutions. That's a neat niche.
That $3 to $12 million loan is really neglected in the marketplace by the larger national banks. And you can make a great living there. Even on the multifamily real estate side, I mean, the great loans, they get the very large loans are very, very price competitive, but you can get a little extra yield on a small loan with the mom and pop type businesses. And I think, like your strategy, it's a great opportunity for banks that are flat and are close to the market.
Your average loan is less than $4 million, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even though you did $11 billion in loans.
Yeah, we got a lot of little
loans.
But I think the good news is this is a huge market.
Absolutely.
And the opportunities are in the really big banks, and everybody can pick from there. We don't have to beat up each other. There's plenty of opportunity in this market.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. One of the things that's great about this place, it's almost like an infinity bank.
Yeah.
It just, the size of this market is so large, and it's been so dominated, by the mega banks, 60 to 70%, that there is tremendous opportunity for people that want to deal with a bank that knows them.
Right.
We're not, that's not a tired concept, but it's one we have to execute on every day.
Right, and I believe in one of your notices that I was reading, it said you'll send your bankers out up to 12 hours a day to visit the customer.
7 days a week.
7 days a week.
We do it, we call it concierge banking. It's taking the bank to the customer.
And you think about it, there's two ways the banks have traditionally gone the value proposition for the client. One's a product push, or the other is a service strategy. At least we've chosen the service side. There are plenty of terrific banks that are great about providing product at a low cost and a repetitive basis. Capital One is an excellent product provider because look at the credit card business they do.
But that's their, you see, Capital One is two banks. They're basically, Capital One is two entities. There's the credit card company out of Virginia, and then there's a bank out of New York, even though they're allegedly from Virginia. And neither shall the two talk, because they're two different businesses. Okay, my joke is, am I with the credit card or am I with the bank? So it's a different market over there.
They're both data-driven, product-focused strategies compared to as you were talking about, the concierge service where you're trying to understand the client's needs and you're taking the company, the bank, to them and providing the full service proposition to that client. It's very different than a product push.
Here's the next question. Joe, you've done 10 acquisitions. You've grown from 1.8 to 44.5. You've done 8 acquisitions. You've grown from 3.5 to, let's say, 13 billion. Is it a necessity for all of you banks, all sitting over here, to make another acquisition to grow?
No, it's not a necessity, but certainly when the opportunities present themselves, they're just compounding positive.
But we don't have the time, that you could buy the AmTrust, okay? That you can buy. There are less opportunities today than there were before.
I'm not so sure there are less opportunities. I think that there is an adjustment period that we're in because there is a serious amount of regulatory involvement that didn't exist before that needs to be attended to. Once that's done, the opportunities are all over the place.
I think the regulatory burden on a bank under $1 billion is going to be pretty substantial in the coming years. And it's there now.
Wasn't
plus
that a
put
big
that
thing? You know, you being a bank auditor at this, going over the years, especially in New Jersey, there were all these banks who wanted to, these entrepreneurs who opened up their own bank, and they never grew to $1 billion. Okay, you know, they had their small little branches, and you know, Mr. Larry, you know, he was the president, the chairman. Then he'd bring in the doctor over here. He'd bring someone else. Okay, these banks, what's happening to them? Are they still, are the regulators allowing these banks to be created?
Well, there hasn't been a de novo bank in New Jersey in the last 3 years. You know, the FDIC I think, has made a decision to make it more difficult to organize a bank. But, you know, a lot of these banks, they have the regulatory burden, and then you got your net interest margin and the ability to grow. You know, it's a rate volume game. You're being squeezed on the net interest margin, and they're not growing. So I think some of these boards are going to have to take a good hard look and see what their strategic plans are.
Contemplate. I was in Washington a number of months ago, and one of the bankers that was there was talking about the regulatory burden, and he had to actually go out and hire 2 experienced people to accommodate the regulator. 2 people. But those 2 people cost him as much as 40% of his staff. In other words, they cost him as much as 8 people. He only had 23 employees.
But that's why he can't be in business.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point.
Because of the cost involved.
I think there is an economy of scale issue. Personally, I think you have to get above $3 billion or even approaching $5 billion to drive those economies of scale where you can afford great talent, and but lower your costs overall, spread your costs across the revenue. Because I think in this environment, to Kevin's point, this is a really low interest rate environment that's going to be extended still for a long time. You have to become more efficient.
But someone said to me recently when I was writing an article, even though the rates are down, your yields may be better today than they were a couple years ago. Is that correct?
Spreads are, yeah.
Spreads.
Yeah, yeah, because the cost of funds is so low.
Right.
But it's coming down.
Yeah.
Yeah, the margins are coming down.
Right.
When do you see rates going up?
And that's the whole problem. The change, and this is what everybody's got to be mindful of, if in fact the cost of your liabilities go up faster than the earnings on your assets,
Absolutely.
you're going to be in big trouble 3 years, 5 years, 6 years out. The reality is that mismatch is being created today. This artificial environment, and this is Fed driven, is not being driven by good market reasoning. It's being driven by a distortion. And that change, when it occurs, will impact banking across the world, not just across the country. And it'll be...
The last 3 years, we've been budgeting the change. You know,
Yeah.
the second half of the year, rates were going to go up. It hasn't
You
happened.
know, the comment I would tell somebody, you know, finance, you're never going to see these rates at 4%. And then the guy would scream at me. He says, idiot, you know, last year you told me 4%, now it's 2 3/4 or 3%. So the question is, should borrowers lock in rates? I think at this time I would lock in rates. So I think, you know, all of you have grown and you will continue to grow, and there will be more competition like the rest of you. If I sat with people next year, we'd have the same conversation of new kids in the block. But I believe each one being driven by the way you're doing business, okay, and rewarding your people, sometimes in stock, sometimes in actual cash, sometimes in future attorney opportunities, by selling stock, will help banks grow. And I think more and more people want to be. There's no better city than New York. And I'd like to thank Joe Ficalora, Richard East, Jack Kopinski, and Kevin Cummings, and I'll see you next week.